Hello. So in this video, we're going to talk about Deadtime Stories Volume 1. I'm here in Pittsburgh for a conference, and so I figured what better to talk about than a movie hosted by George Romero, famously associated with the Pittsburgh area, and written by or co-written by, partially directed by, and partially starring Jeff Monahan, who is a Pittsburgh-based filmmaker. I've done a couple of interviews with Jeff before. We've talked about some of George Romero's work, talked about some of his work. But I figured, since I'm in Pittsburgh, we're going to celebrate some Pittsburgh horror. So, Deadtime Stories Volume 1. This is a short film anthology is the right. It's an anthology movie, and normally I don't really watch anthology movies. I'm just not a huge fan of the format, so I don't tend to go for them. But again, Romero and Monahan, it seemed like a great option to go for. So there's three. Basically, I'm going to call them short films. I don't know if that's properly the right term in an anthology context, or if it's better to call them like segments or something. I don't know. Regardless, I'm going to call them short films because they are basically standalone pieces introduced by George Romero, who does an absolutely spectacular job with it. Because while apparently Romero himself was quite a wonderful person, he is super good at being creepy, which you should not really be surprised by, given that it's George Romero who basically invented the modern zombie genre. But he's so good in this role, where there's this sort of slightly like Rod Serling Twilight Zone kind of like, oh, I'm just here, introducing these stories, and I'm very calm about it, and there's nothing to worry about. But they are going to, but it's also this very sort of macabre, like, you get the sense that things are not quite right here, right? And Romero does this great job of sort of conveying that in this very subtle way. And I think part of it helps that they sort of break his appearance up between these sort of different TV screens, and generally when he's on, say, this screen, the other screens is sort of like static, like they've got the snow, right? So that all sort of adds to the creepiness factor. So that being said, there's three short films here. The first, directed by Jeff, is called Valley of the Shadow. I really like Jeff. I actually think he's a great director from the other stuff that I've seen by him. I think he's a really good actor. This is, in my view, the weakest of the three. So because I do like Jeff, I don't really like saying that, but it's not that it's a bad film. There's two concerns that I have with it, basically. So one is we go quite a while into the film without really understanding what's going on and why, right? So this woman basically convinces this rich dude of some sort of 80s investor style, right? Like what exactly it is that he does is not super clear, but clearly he's got a lot of money. So she convinces this guy to fund this expedition to South America. I want to say to Brazil, but I don't remember if it's specified quite that thoroughly. but they go down there. She is looking for her husband, who has gone missing in this region, but they're also looking for this plant. And until quite late in, it's it's roughly a 20-minute runtime. And I would say until about 13, 14 minutes in, we don't really get an explanation of what this plant is or why they're looking for it. And what we learn is that it's supposed to be a sort of fountain of youth plant. Like her husband was a biopharmacologist or something like this, right? And he was looking for this plant on behalf of a pharmaceutical company because, of course, one of the big things that pharmaceutical companies do is they attempt to basically take indigenous knowledge, patent it, and then sell it, usually in exploitative ways. So I think the sort of structure of it is quite awkward in my view, just because we spend so much time following this character and we're not really sure why. And I don't love that. The other element of it is they get attacked. This group gets attacked by a person or some people. It's not 100% clear because we never really see clearly who the attacker is or attackers are. Implicitly, it seems like probably more than one person because a lot of people in their campsite are wiped out. And this raises concerns for me about the representation of Indigenous people, right? And this is actually quite a big problem in the horror genre, because you've got all these sort of traditions of an Indian burial ground and the use of Indigenous mythology, certain creature starting with W, whose name I won't say because it is regarded by some Indigenous people as maybe not offensive necessarily, but problematic, to say the name of this entity. So right, there are these sort of problems with Indigenous representation in horror traditionally, and the idea of the headhunters, the cannibals, things like this. It really is very problematic in shaping, particularly Western or global Northern perceptions of Indigenous people. So I'm not real thrilled with that aspect of it. Again, just because I think there's problems that come with this type of representation. So that's the first film. The second, but it does have a really good, actually, sort of strange, creepy twist ending. So I'm not dragging it. I think there's things that for me don't necessarily work that well. But there is a lot of tension, right? That sort of running through the woods or the jungle in this case, trying to escape an unknown killer. That's very good horror stuff, right? That's the lifeblood right there. And then, you've got this great creepy twist ending, which is very, very cool and very unexpected. The second story I actually quite liked as well, but again, I've got some concerns with it. So this one is called Wet, and it's directed by Michael Fischa. One of the things I really like about this one is actually that it's a nautical horror story, and I like oceanic stuff. I like nautical stuff. I like that vibe. I really enjoy that. This one is about a guy named Jack, played by Jeff Monahan, and he's really excellent in this role, I think. He finds this, so he's basically sort of an alcoholic living on a beach in a shack, basically. I mean, it's not like a decrepit shack, but it's like a beach hut, right? Type deal. Um, so he finds this thing on the beach. He tries to sell it to this antique dealer. The antique dealer's like, no, man, you need to. There's a body part in that. That is a Mary tomb, I think is the term for it. And he's like, listen, man, fucking mermaids, they are some bad business, right? Like they will destroy you. And the only thing you can do to stop them is dismember them, bury them, the pieces in these boxes. Otherwise, they will reassemble and they will keep coming after you. And so this antique dealer, Swan, I think Swan is his name, if I remember correctly. He is like, you need to put whatever body part it was in that box, back in that box, rebury it as deep as you can, and leave it the hell alone. Needless to say, Jack does not do this. Jack goes out, he looks around, he digs up some other boxes, because they're made of gold and jade, which is super valuable. So his plan basically is to sell them. He takes the body parts of this dismembered mermaid and basically just puts them in a crate and just whatever. This, of course, allows the mermaid to reassemble, and while she's in pieces, she's all decomposed. When she reassembles, she basically sort of regenerates. And she goes after Jack. So initially he's sort of all creeped out. There's this great sort of horror vibe of like, okay, I'm in my house. I know that I'm alone, but I don't know that I'm alone. I feel like I'm not, right? So that sort of great anxiety-inducing element is there. Jack goes to sleep, drunk. He wakes up several times, but in the relevant moment, he sort of wakes up to this mermaid climbing up his body, and she like comes up and like she's very beautiful, and she like looks him in the face, and then she goes down with the implication that she's going to engage in a certain activity, an activity in which normally biting is not appreciated, we'll say. But that is the mermaid's approach. So she bites down. Jack screams, predictably, looks down at this mermaid who now has more of a fish face. And basically he like falls out of bed and he's like dragging himself away, and she's coming after him and basically just like eating pieces of his legs. At one point, his entire right leg, basically from the knee down, is dismembered. She is just going after him. The next morning, Swan shows up, and he's basically like, hey, Jack, let me in. I have a bad feeling about things. Swan then gets into the house. He sees all of the Mary Tomb boxes that Jack has dug up, and he's basically like, well, shit. He then follows the blood trail into Jack's bathroom, finds Jack, who has been transformed into a mermaid, and he's just like laying in his bathtub being like, wow, this sucks. I'm really in a lot of pain. Swan then dismembers him with an axe, puts him in the boxes, and starts burying them. He then, on the porch of Jack's house, sees the mermaid, who apparently now has human legs for reasons. I guess because she ate Jack's legs and like swapped them with her tail. It's not 100% clear why that has occurred. But Swan basically comes up. He does not take the axe, which I think was a rookie mistake. He has a conversation with the mermaid, and she's basically like, yeah, you knew all about this because you killed one of us when you were young, buried us in the box. That was me. We're all interconnected. Humans are all interconnected, but you all don't notice it. We are aware of it. And Swan's like, this is not a good situation for me to be in. She then stabs him and takes him down to the ocean. So again, I think it's a really, really good one. The main critique that I have of this one is some of the sort of backstory is undeveloped or ill-developed, maybe, is a better way of putting it, right? Like, a lot of this sort of hinges on Swan having this knowledge about mermaids because he has encountered one in his youth, but there's no real, like, there's not, we don't know, we don't learn anything about that, right? It is what it is. It's sort of treated as this is a thing that happened, ask no questions, which, you know. So again, I think that's kind of a minor critique, especially for a short film, right? Like, you can't develop these sort of complex things all that well in a short film. Cool. I'm on board with that. I'm not bothered that much. And the third short film is called House Call, directed by Tom Savini. And this one, I think, is really, really good. It is a vampire story with a great twist ending. Really, really good tension in it. So it's set in the olden times, sometime between, based on, to the extent that you can, like, nail it down to a specific period based on the clothing and what's probably quite a relatively low-budget short film, sometime between the 1880s and 1910-ish, right? So it's sort of frontier days. A woman she has tied up her son because he is claiming to be a vampire. She doesn't believe this, but she's concerned that something is going on. She calls their local doctor, who apparently is the new doctor in town, even though he's quite elderly. So he's come out to become the town doctor quite late in his career, it would seem. But basically, he sort of comes over and he's like, yeah, I'll go in and talk to him, but vampires aren't real according to modern science. So he goes in, he talks to this kid. This kid's like, yeah, I'm a vampire. Test my blood or whatever you can do. Doc takes some blood, goes back out, talks to Mom for a while. Mom's basically like, yeah, he's claimed he's killed a whole bunch of people and drank their blood. So I am concerned about this. And the doctor's like, maybe it's psychological. There's now psychologists out there. I don't really hold with psychology, but I'll send the blood to a hospital. We'll see what's up. And there's a great twist, which I won't spoil for you. I do recommend that you watch the movie. I think it's really, really good. It's a fun horror anthology. I think it's a very, very so House Call aesthetically is very sort of traditional Gothic. I would say traditional American style Gothic, right? Where it's sort of set in this farmhouse. It is dark. It's at night. You're lit with like candles and things like this, and it is this very sort of dark, creepy vibe. So yeah, so I think the thing that's cool about Deadtime Stories Volume 1 across the board is actually that you've got quite different styles, different aesthetics for each of these short films, right? You have this sort of jungle setting, this pursuit by an unknown killer or killers in the first one. In the second one, you have this sort of nautical, you've disturbed a legendary creature that is now coming after you, and that sort of like solitary existence at the edge of the ocean. balanced with the threat inherently posed by the ocean, right? Because the ocean is an environment that kills human beings quite quickly without substantial equipment to prevent it from doing so, right? So that sort of that fear, that danger of the ocean, and that sort of idea of like the danger of the natural world in some way being sort of personified, and that personification of the outside coming into the home to threaten, right? That's a great horror trope. And then in House Call, again, you have this very sort of constricted, dark space with this implicit threat and the uncertainty surrounding it, right? Great traditional Gothic horror approach. So again, you've got these three stories, three short films that they aren't necessarily all that similar on the surface, but when put together, they form this sort of constellation of great horror tropes. So again, really, really good. I don't know that everybody associated with Deadtime Stories Volume 2 is Pittsburgh-based, but Romero definitely was. Jeff Monahan is. So again, here representing Pittsburgh. I actually don't have that much connection to Pittsburgh. But representing Pennsylvania, right? I live in Pennsylvania. I'm now in Pittsburgh physically. So yeah, there we go. Good stuff.